It appears to be live, and so we'll make a little test to make sure everything's working well enough and such. Appears to be live, and so we'll make. Yeah, we did that. So probably comments and mostly probably some kind of discussion of how the fundamental kind of stuff happens, like this idea that there's stuff going this way and there's stuff going this way, and that all has to add up in the end. So some conversation about ether to start with, ether, whatever, and I contend it's sort of superfluous. Yeah, I think that'd be an appropriate word. Sorry, gotta make this window a little smaller. I believe that helps my impression that serves some sort of purpose. So it appears to have served that purpose. I can move this over here, and I can maybe see it from behind this window. Yeah, it's not quite right, actually. Huh. Yeah, it's still not in the right position. That's strange. I guess I did it to the wrong window or something. Should have worked. Sorry. Try again. Here, let's see. Minus. It's still not right. Strange. Not resizing the right size. Wonder what that means. Probably doesn't mean anything, but get me into trouble later, though. Let's see if I move that over. Doesn't do much. Doesn't do much. Oh, those are sub comments. That's why I'm having some trouble. Okay. I understand now. It's got comments under comments. Fooled me for a moment. All right, so I guess first I'll do this other comment. This is sort of in my way. Chat box that nobody uses. But anyway, all right, why do you always say you cannot shoot an electron in a straight line to the moon? Because they haven't done it, because they don't have any examples of it, because there's no experiments using electrons, which would be very interesting experiments, I think. The electrons could be very handy in doing all kinds of radar work and detections and, bouncing them off of things and all that kind of stuff. And no, they can't do any of that stuff because they just don't have any durability. Is there a theory or an experiment behind that claim? Well, the theory is kind of, I don't know. What theory do they have? They don't really give you a theory of motion in the sense that they really don't explain anywhere on a chart how things move. That somehow isn't important. Like, what's the natural state of these things and how well do they move from point A to point B? There's no real explanation of that. So you just have to glean it in pieces about what phenomenon they do use and like what stuff comes from outer space and all that kind of stuff. And clearly the electrons that are coming, say, off the sun are in a plasma. So they're part of a big blob of stuff, lots of other atomic structure. Not just electrons, that kind of, so you just have to piece it together that, yes, electrons don't go anywhere unaccompanied. Some kind of thing like that. Is there a YouTube video about the phenomenon? No. So this Grown Eden, something like that. Grown Eden, yeah. Let's just say it real fast, or something. I don't know. So he seems to get my theory pretty well, which is interesting. So he says it's because electrons don't have a perpetual motion engine in his theory. So it's not, that statement isn't really part of my theory, electrons not being able to go very far. It's just one of the facts that I think is out there that you have to account for, that this idea of velocity doesn't mean that every subatomic particle can have it, that every single particle has it. Everything's not a baseball. Everything can't absorb velocities and accelerations. And that's really important to understand when you're going to start talking about what inertia is and what movement is. And so I would argue that the only thing we know that moves perpetually is the photon. So that'll sort of be the subject I'd like to get to eventually here. All right, in his theory, atoms can trap forces that keep pushing them forward, and that explains inertia. Yeah, it explains acquiring velocity. So you get accelerated, which means through the process of acceleration, your substance, the atoms inside of you, are configured in such a way as they start engineering. They arrange force in such a way as they have more force going this way than they have going the other way, and that means they just keep going. It works because the black force gets redirected perpendicularly by the proton core, so it can keep hitting electrons. Well, that's obviously that simplification. It takes a little bit more to understand. It has to do with the structure of nucleuses and all that kind of stuff. Let's see. So it can keep hitting electrons. You need at least 2 electrons to build an engine. So that would be the helium atom. Yes. And those are one of the things that can actually travel through space some distances are helium nuclei. Anyway, the inherent problem with electrons is they are charged. They get deflected or experience a change in path very easily. Yeah, that's half of it, but I would argue that the other half of it is that they are by design incapable of keeping, because the environment keeps taking their whatever change they have, velocity. There's a randomness in the universe, and that randomness in the universe will reduce them back to random. It'll take it away. It'll take any imbalance in their shape, so to speak, and it will just by sheer volume consume that imbalance, absorb it out of the electron. This may be also how they produce something resembling an interference pattern. Oh, don't put those words in my mouth. But anyway, conventional physics would say they sometimes travel as waves, and in that way they disagree. They agree their path to the moon would not be predictable. Yeah, well, yeah, so no, they don't make it. They won't have a path to the moon. They'll stop well short of that. Something like a traveling cloud of a probability density function. Yeah, well, don't mix mine with theirs. That's unless you keep observing them, which is the case of sending them to the moon. Basically means you have to keep hitting them with a truck to make sure they are still on track. Well, you wouldn't to see if they can get there on their own. You'd either see them arrive or they wouldn't arrive. You don't have to keep. But obviously, the point is they don't have energy, perpetual energy. Their energy is given back to the field, in my opinion. They're subject to drag. Electrons and protons are subject to drag, where the engine, the boat engine that you can make out of atoms overcomes drag, goes upstream. So good answer, thank you. All right, so this guy responded to this is Go Grow Eden. Yes, this is the same guy, and he's the one now arguing for ether, which is bizarre. But anyway, you've agreed that space is not truly empty, but filled with stuff at very low density. Well, I never said low density. I said insanely high density. But whatever. The matter is low density. The force is insanely highly dense. I'm not arguing that movement through this kind of space is impossible, but that movement through truly empty space is. Well, I'm saying I don't know. It's just silly, in my opinion. I'm saying ether is totally superfluous. It's totally unnecessary because your ether still has to be moved. And so, what's the difference? We have no known example of it. I mean, again, this is just so obnoxious. This no known example of. We have plenty of examples of things, and yes, none of us have videotape of the micro world to prove anything. But there's lots of evidence indicating that things like photons have a reliable speed and they are moving through nothing. And it's when they hit something that they're ruined, not in any way helped. But anyway, unless you already assume your conclusion. Well, you're the one already assuming your conclusion. You're such a hypocrite in this subject. Okay, when throwing a ball so that it moves through the air, the ball does some work, does all the work, but also the air does some work. That's just nonsense. The ball pushes away the air in front, and the air in the back gets sucked into the void. The ball leaves. Well, what does that have to do? It doesn't give the ball any extra velocity. It doesn't help it any. The ball leaves a zone of low pressure and the air with higher pressure distributes itself to fill the gap. So what? It doesn't do the ball any good. This shows we have examples of objects traveling through mediums. I mean, it's just, you know, and how does the medium have anything to do with the ball's travel? All the energy came from the ball and the medium just took some away. That's all that happens. The air just creates friction and slows the ball down. It eventually stops because of it. I mean, you're not making any, you're not making a very good argument for your defendant or whatever. If empty space is truly empty, it cannot do any of the work. Yeah, and again, where have I ever said the empty space does any work? So again, this is just so fucking stupid. Whatever. The particle must do all of the work itself. Yeah, duh. That's why it's going the speed of light. It's constantly moving. That's right. That's what it does. It doesn't do anything else. It moves in a straight line at the speed of light. It cannot work like the ball above. So again, your atmosphere does not make the ball move. So you're just so wrong to use that as an example because your atmosphere does no constructive work. It only does destructive work. All right. If we think of particles as some kind of information, I would never do that. It's retarded. What is it that remains, that removes the information of a moment ago? There's only a history. There's no information. And sometimes you can see the history because you have some kind of context and you have other consequences that can give you some insight into it. But that's all there is. There's no information. It's just stupid. Why does the particle moving through space not smear? Why the fuck would it smear? Just amazing. Not leave an after image. Why does it not act like a paintbrush or a marker pen? I just don't understand why somebody would think in these terms. Something has to be bleedable. It has to be made out of mud. It can't be made out of geranium. In an ether-free universe. I mean, it's just such wacky crap. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying ether can't be possible for blah 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 reason. I'm saying it's just not necessary. So it's redundant almost. It just doesn't do anything but make the universe have to be more complicated than I think its elemental nature would be. The idea is that the origins, the elements of the universe are going to be simple, not more complicated. And ether is a structure, built-in mechanism of removing their after image. I'm just amazing. There's no after image. What the hell that is? I mean, yeah, it's like you have to leave a trail behind, like some kind of poo smear in your underwear or something. I don't know. It's just so fucking stupid. Oh, anyway. Where was I? Sorry. I mean, for you, okay, after images. Yeah, there's no after images. How do they do this? They don't have to because it's just mush. How do they fill their past portions with empty space? Again, this is just so stupid. Empty space can't do anything. It can't fill anything. It can't go anywhere. It can't expand. It can't contract. It doesn't do anything. It's empty. You don't remove it and put it somewhere. You don't occupy empty space's chair. Empty space doesn't have a chair. Do they create empty space? How does creating nothing do anything? Well, whatever. As we have agreed, we haven't agreed apparently, nothing can't do anything. That's right. So why are you asking me dopey questions about how many pounds can it bench? You know, can it bench a lot? If there is not an ether, it must be the particle that does all the magic. Yeah, the magic is it goes in a straight line at a constant speed. Wow, too magical for me. I can't. Whoa. Woo. It cannot suck in empty space if empty space is not filled with jello. And it cannot rotate it around itself like a water wheel. And again, why would it have to? Where have I given the indication that empty space is a water wheel? So it is just so fucking stupid. What you then must do to win me over is propose a mechanism of how particles can do this, remove their past information and after images. I just have no way to. You think a bowling ball rolling down an alley has after images stuck in there somewhere? You think galaxies that move through the space have left after images somewhere? I mean, it's just a pile of shit. I can't answer your question because it's a shitty question. It's so stupid. I'm sorry, this is a stupid question. I have to accept the premise of after images. No, I don't. Do kinetic balls swinging back and forth? Do they keep crashing into their after images? What the hell are you talking about? I'm not aware of anybody that has ever succeeded in this. Well, succeed in what? Having rational conversation with you? The difficult part is that you can't assume your conclusion, which you are doing all over the fucking place. You're not even trying to understand that nothing is nothing. If you are trying to show particles can move through truly empty space, you can't assume movement through empty space already exists. Yes, I can. That's exactly the fucking point. That's how the system works. Your system says, so I guess I'll just finish this and draw it. You can't just say because it's not there anymore without providing a mechanism that makes it not there anymore. Again, nothing has to not be there anymore. Nothing has to go away. Nothing has to move. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid as a premise. I don't have to accept that premise. It's ludicrous as a premise. All right. So let's go to the drawing table, I think. Yeah. I mean, that's just such horseshit. All right, that should be working. It is mostly working. It's close enough to usable. All right, so ether. I probably should have another piece of paper ready. Yes. For my subject. All right, so the idea of this ether would be, this perturbating ether. It's just basically saying that, okay, instead of having something go from here to there, okay, through nothing, okay, these ether people are just saying there's a something, so to speak, and then there's a something, and then there's a something, and so there's dominoes. See, because it can't be solid, right? Because if you make it solid, if you just make a solid thing, and you hit it at one end, well, then it's going to instantaneously pop out this end. So it's not like ether can be made out of some kind of solid substance, because then we'd still have to have some sort of grid work to it to be able to move stuff in straight lines. I mean, we know the force moves in straight lines, so let's not pretend that you know, that it's going everywhere. Okay, the photons that go inside my eye and terminate, there's no evidence of them anywhere else. Okay, they have no existence anywhere else. They only have, they're used up entirely, and no one in the rest of the universe can almost even know they existed by any evidence. So anyway, so this perturbating crap is something, a real something, okay, something that's part of the matter. So there's some sort of rarefied or compressed bit of something jiggles, okay, and it jiggles, 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 jiggles. So that requires each one of these little bits to move into each other, each one of these little dominoes to crash into each other, so to speak. So they're all going to be doing the movement. And you're really saying is, well, the speed of the perturbation really just has to do with how much space there is in between the little bits, right? I mean, that could be the definition of how fast something perturbates is, you know, how much space is there between the little bits, you know, or something like that. But that's all you've got as a theory, all right, is that you have to have some kind of thing that does that. And my argument is fine. If you want to reduce the whole universe to that, I'd probably be agreeable, as long as you understand that every single bit of that stuff, all your little bits of jello or whatever you're going to call them, they all have to have a predefined jiggle direction. So they're already jiggling in a direction. So they're constantly moving, and all you can do is change which way they're moving. So you can make them go this way, and you make them jiggle this way, and they can jiggle this way, or it could jiggle this way, or it could jiggle this way at any one moment. Because that's the only way you're going to create pressure. And you really have to create pressure to explain gravity. Because you can't use this jello crap to make an attractive force. The attractive force has to really be the opposite, okay, of a high pressure force. Things are pushed into each other. Things are not attracted. They're pushed. And the only way you're going to get the push is you're going to have to pressurize your ether. And once you do that, then you're just creating my scenario where I'm just saying, fine, there's these little bits and they're all going in a direction. And I'm just saying, and they're separated by some more distance than you're saying. I'm saying they're separated by a little bit more distance. And I'm saying, quite obviously, that there's two colors of them. You know, and they interact differently with these other objects called the electron and the proton. And the electron and proton might essentially just be this stuff, you know, stuck together, frozen, where it has a bit in it that going this way and a bit going this, you know, that's made out of bits, and one of them's going this way, and one of them's jiggling this way, and one of them's jiggling this way, and one of them's jiggling this way. And they're stuck in association with each other, so it just doesn't go anywhere, it just jiggles around. And when a new jiggler hits it, a new little ball hits it, it can knock one of these out, so it can knock this one out, and that one's going that way, and it can replace it with one going this way. And then it's going to be lopsided, and then it'll move in a direction for a while. But that's you know, sorry, that's not entirely in the drawing, so you didn't see every bit of that. It's over there. Sorry. There's lots to keep track of here, you know. It's hard work being a scientist. Sort of. Why is that so crooked? Oh, jeez. Ruin that screen and keep the thing from going that way. Move the camera down. As soon as I start messing with this, I gotta come up with a better system of some kind, but not that easy to do. Get the lighting just right and not screw everything else up. See, that's all screwed up now. The lighting's terrible. This isn't at a good enough angle, so this has to come back further. All right, that's better. Now, at least it's close to the same color. Now I just have to move the camera up, up. That's a little better. All right, so on to a little bit I wanted to add, I think. So I'm just saying ether just is creating dominoes. Then you have to have dominoes, have to have a mechanism for hitting each other. So whether they have little things bump into each other, or whether you have dominoes that pop back up, or whatever you make this ether out of, it's superfluous. Because all I can do is just say, look, take your ether bits and just move them further apart. What's the problem? I mean, obviously, if they're dominoes and they're further apart, they can't hit each other. But you know, I'm just basically saying that this movement thing is going to happen anyway. You're going to make something move a little bit. You're going to have to make something that acquires movement. So why? And like I said, they all have to be moving to create pressure that's pushing everything together. So it's just superfluous. It's just totally unnecessary, because the bits inside your ether have to perturbate, and that means they have to be able to move. Anyway. It's just totally doesn't make any sense to me to try to make an ether. It just confuses the subject. It just gets in the way. It just creates all kinds of problems about this idea of having rays of force and all that kind of stuff, because it would create a bunch of mess. So anyway, Carl Betrost first extreme cool and what? Terped? What is that? Why do people write shit in here that doesn't make any sense? I don't know where. I don't know why I'm on this fucking planet of lunatics. Very depressing. So, all right, let's get rid of this piece of paper. I'll mess something up. I got too much clutter everywhere. I gotta, well, whatever. What I have to do. My life is just such a mess right now. Such a disastrously doomable thing it's going to be turning into. All right, so fundamentally, so it's just so hard to be, how maybe so careful about how deep you go. I would argue the universe is just patterns of stuff moving in a direction, and there's a simple mechanism for the communication of stuff with stuff. But anyway, but you have to just concede there's a clear, that we can see in the universe that exists now, distinction between the force, which moves the speed of light in all cases, gravity, magnetism, like the electric EMF, and gravity, magnetism, and light. They all move the same this speed, because they're all made out of the same little bits, the same force bits, and that's all the forces. All the forces are just moving the speed of light, and everything else is a consequence of that. And in the sense that the matter bits are not doing any moving inherently; they're balanced, and all you can do is imbalance them for a period of time. The elemental bits. So trying to understand it as, it's like if you had an immovable object and you bounce something off of it that's movable. What the thing that bounces off is going to have to do is it's going to do, you could say it does all the compression. So like a ball hitting something, it's round and then it goes, really flat to meet the surface, and then it bounces off and comes back to round again. So it comes in, it compresses, and then it bounces off as a reflex. So the entire mechanism is inside of this, and you could argue that maybe you could make something that is so perfect at doing that it doesn't impose any pressure on this object. But we know we can't make anything like that in the real world. Can't make some kind of perfectly compressible absorber that allows something to transfer 100% of its energy to keep 100% of its energy. So on this nuclear level, these forces have to interact in some way where you have to account for these changes, like who's who's absorbing the pressure. So we know that because photons are durable, I mean, they're 100% photon going in and 100% photon going out. They don't lose speed or mass. That clearly there has to be some mechanism when they interact with matter that is doing this perfect spring thing. Something has to be springing them for that to be the truth. Just logically, you can understand, because it's kind of impossible to interact with something without interacting with it, theoretically. So you'd understand the ball would lose velocity eventually because of the impacts would create heat and compression and so the systems we see, friction consumes everything, and we can't see what a system without friction would look like, without these rules being pretty harshly imposed. So the idea would be is that in the real universe, there's these matter bits, an electron or proton, let's just say. And what they can do is that a little bit comes in, has a direction, draw it as an arrow, and it's going to impact that thing. And when it impacts it, there's going to be a consequence, in the sense that I would argue that essentially it is absorbed by the thing. But to be absorbed by the thing, okay, it has to release something in the opposite direction. You'd say, obviously, it has to make an exchange with something. So if you just thought of it as an exchange, then you could say that the next step would be that the thing, okay, is inside of it now, and that means this thing will move as long as this thing is inside of it. Theoretically. So if it doesn't give anything back, then all it does is push this forward. You could sort of see that. That sort of makes sense. This thing is absorbed in a fish, okay, like the school of fish argument. It's absorbed another fish, and the fish has a direction, and some of that direction is going to be bled into the school. And so this thing moves. Now, if another fish comes along, and now at this new position, fish comes in this way and hits this thing, right? Then, the question is going to be, what's going to be the consequence? And you'd sort of argue that, there's a couple of choices, but as a practical matter, there's a fish going in that's going the opposite way, and essentially it can be absorbed and kept as both fish going this way. One's going this way and one's going this way. Or you could argue that, no, one will go this way and one will go this way out, and so the fish will leave. And you're back to the same thing you were before, and you're stationary. So you've returned yourself back to this state, because you're just giving back this fish and you gave back this fish. So you're perfectly conservational, and all you've done is move some space. So I would argue that's what electrons are doing. As they absorb energy, the field keeps interacting with them, and all these little bits keep coming in. And eventually, by the law of averages, if they have any imbalance, like say they've absorbed 3 fish going this way, and then we have 1 fish going this way, by the laws of averages, right, these are going to get hit or consumed much sooner than this one. 3 to 1 odds that one of these get hit. So any imbalance you have, the environment will take it away eventually, just because the environment's imposing kind of an even distribution. So that's what I mean when I say absorption, is that it can't give back until it stops moving. So, all right, so let's go to the more elaborate example of, like say, inside of an atom, or what we see as any transfer. So anytime we see a reflection, so you're seeing colors reflected, you're seeing light coming off of me. Now, are you seeing something that actually bounced off of something? Or are you seeing something that was absorbed and then readmitted? And that's the argument, is that I'm arguing that it's always absorbed and readmitted. because the matter has this complex. The matter is like the perfect tennis ball. The matter is capable of absorbing an influence and springing back perfectly and keeping everything 100% conservational inside, because it's a it's a perfect mechanism. There's no frictions, no losses. It's just a good spring, a good durable spring is what matter turns into, in a sense. All right, so this is a little trickier to draw. I'm going to try to use all of our space, I think. All right, so I'm arguing that electrons are in positions around the proton. So this is just half the atom, let's say. So you have, and it's exaggerated, of course. So you have electrons in positions, and the idea is the pressure between the electrons keeps them incapable of falling into the proton. So this wants to go into the proton, but it's repelled by these two other electrons, for example, in this example. So the idea would be is that when a photon comes in, a little bit, and it hits the electron absorbs it and gets some movement in this direction. And what's going to happen essentially is these forces from these other electrons are going to push, and that means they're going to get more, there'll be more probability of impacts from these directions, which will add up to this direction, of course. And so what's going to happen is the electron moves to the new position. So, I hate to have to draw it again, but I will. So now that it's compressed, you can see it's been pushed in, and it's going to stop, and then it's going, and when it stops, that's going to be when it's going to release one piece of something going this way, right? That's, and then it's going to pop back out, right? So now the it gave back this when it stops. So when it stops, because it got hit by other stuff, it gives back the little bit. So we had a little bit went in, and now we're giving back the little bit here in the opposite direction, quite obviously. So, and then what's going to happen is this electron is going to move, because now it's got momentum. Because now it's going to get hit again because it's in a place that is high pressure. So we've created high pressure here. So even though it stopped, it's still under higher pressure. So it's going to be pushed this way. And so now the electron is going to move this way, a little bit. And it's going to overshoot, right? Because that's what they always do, right? They always overshoot. Perhaps. And then the force is going to, again, a little bit will, either the fact that it's getting away from the proton will end up meaning there's low pressure on this side, which means the average pressure will push it back. So now it's going away from the proton. It's going to be pulled back in, essentially, but there's no pull. It's still a push force, but you don't need extra push is the point. I don't need to bring another photon in to stop it and make it go back. That'll happen because there'll be less pressure on this side, and therefore the average pressure on this side will be enough to push it back. But the idea is it'll push back. And when it pushes back, it'll go too far again a little bit, and then the point is that it's going to stop again. And when it stops again, it's going to release another little bit. And it might do that 3 or 4 times. And just like a pendulum, the period is going to be the same. So the amount of time it takes. So essentially, it's like if you thought of this as a rubber band, and you could have a ball on it, that wobbles back and forth, that you stretch it all the way out, and the first swings are really far, and then it gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, and then it finally stops moving. That's the idea. But the period's always the same. So even though this movement here is going to be a lot less movement, it moves slower there, the electron. So it's less aggressive, so it takes longer. So each place it releases the photon at will be exactly the same distance, which is your frequency of your photon, eventually, the thing we call a photon. But that's what I would argue is creating the photon, is the electron is hit by an amount of these little bits. It gains a velocity. The more bits it hit, the further it goes. And then the acting forces push it back. It gains velocity back, and then it has to stop again. So it stops here. Once it stops here, because the forces of repulsion of the electrons stop it. Once it stops, it gives back this way, because now it's absorbed a little of this and a little of this, and it gave back this, which is the same thing. So now it's back to neutral, and so it just sits there, and now, but it's still in the wrong position, still in high pressure, so it keeps getting pushed, and it gains extra this and this, which means it moves this way. Then it moves too far away, has to go back, 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 back. That's how photons are created, I think. I think it's a really good explanation for how photons are created. But the part I wanted to use it for was just to show this conservation argument, that this is why you don't need an ether. And this is why an ether would just make this insanely messy. It just wouldn't make it work, because distances are so important. And the fact is, the difference between the field energy moving the speed of light and these matter bits that are dead, that have to be pushed everywhere they go, is really an important thing to understand. That's why we don't have electron radiation as something to worry about. Oh, I'm getting irradiated by a ton of electrons. No, not a problem, because they can't go very far without the environment, the randomness of the environment, just taking away all the imbalance that exists in them. So so this guy's got 2-liter J for real worldwide hood star. No, I don't tolerate really stupid screen names. No, you're done. John Gray. I don't know what 0000 means, but whatever. I don't like half your comments. Keep your eye on the red pen. Well, I don't know what that means either, but fine, whatever. I can only provide insight and information. What you people do with it, it's not my fault. I think I spoke reasonable English and attempted to explain the phenomena, and if all you can do is go quack, or quack, 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 and it's not my fault. And such. I mean, I think I said it kind of clearly. I think I explained it very well. I think it's really quite brilliant. Yeah, it's just, and I can't get anything rational out of you people. But that's the whole universe is just this idea that the electrons are just sitting here. Okay, they can absorb a momentum for a period of time until it's taken away from them. So it really is the school of fish analogy. It just works. It's a school of fish that has its own little thing. So it's just sitting here doing this. And then if a fish comes in going one way, and he's saying, I'm really bent on going this way, you guys. So every time you turn me, I'm going to try to go back this way. You know what I mean? But that little bit of a momentum gets absorbed by the school. The fish stays in the school. And as long as that fish is in that school, then the overall effect is going to be this, moving the whole school this little bit, depending on its mass. and 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 then it doesn't stop doing that until you give the fish back. Get rid of the fish, the troublemaker, then you can stay still again. And that's all that's really happening. The matter bits are, the elemental matter bits are completely being manipulated by whatever the force is doing around them. And that's it. They have no identity except what the force says you are. So if you're moving, it's because the force is pushing you. And that's the way it is for electrons and protons. They don't move unless something's forcing them to do it. Forcing. It's a force is pushing them. And I don't want to get into the whole engine inside of matter, but the idea, like, I'll just make it simple again. The idea is this is how you create perpetual motion inside of matter. That you have an electron, and then you have a proton. And the simple rule is that you get a 90-degree change out of the proton for free. So the idea is that this black force reflects off electrons, and it is bent 90 degrees by the proton. So the idea is there's a piece of force, a little force bit. It does this for free, but these impacts are real absorptions. So it's absorbed by this electron until it's given back again. But when it's given back, when the electron stops at this position, let's say, it gives back the force goes back through the proton, hits this guy, gets absorbed, moves it a little bit, then it gives it back, it goes back, it goes back. And so that's the engine that is part of the helium nuclei, has the parts that allow that to happen. The helium nuclei is essentially, another proton here. And the the idea is that all this force gets pushed, force comes in, well, it has to be black force, obviously. Force comes in this way, and it gets trapped in this trap. And this trap keeps the whole mechanism moving this way. Just, over time, it just keeps pushing it this way. So it's obviously more complex than that simplification. But I mean, it does explain why if I throw a wrench in space, the wrench will keep going. It's because I've accelerated it. It's a process, and the process of acceleration essentially pushing all this force into those nuclei. And if the nuclei moves, the electrons move, everything else ends up moving. So everything gets dragged along, and it ends up being like a little motor. And it just keeps pushing, pushes the thing through space. But the only thing that has real perpetual motion, are the little force bits themselves. And again, all you've really done is had a school of fish, you've accepted some new fish this way, and you've trapped them inside the matter so they don't get out. So the ones going this way stay inside. And essentially, their identity stays. And it keeps going. It has an imbalance of little bits. If it walks like a duck. So, Gray, you're sort of, John, you're just sort of making my point for me, right? So if you comment like an imbecile, then you're an imbecile, right? I mean, if it comments like an imbecile and it, types like an imbecile, then it must be an imbecile. So you type 00000, and then you type, keep an eye on the red pen, and then you type if it walks like a duck. So you're sort of making my case for me, buddy. But I appreciate your participation anyway, because there's so few participants. I do all this brilliant crap, and people just run and hide. I'm quite confident it's pretty brilliant. The truth is really close to this. This crap on the paper doesn't look like, oh, that's the truth. It doesn't look like the truth, but yeah, it's really close to the truth. And let's understand, conventional physics has no clue whatsoever. They don't understand any of this force interaction stuff. They have just no. They just call it some vague thing, virtual this and EMF. So they make a symbol out of it. Yeah, they have no clue. And the real key, again, it's for the ether people. The real key is you really do have to have something in your ether that accounts for charge. Charge is a real phenomenon. There's a real thing, plus and minus. Real. The south end, north end of the magnet. Those are real differences. And if you don't have something in your ether accounting for those real differences, I think your ether's dead. Because you're never going to be able to balance the force equations. And you're certainly not going to be able to create attraction, which is, as I pointed out, the absence of pressure. Because you won't have a drain anywhere. And all this wave crap, of course, is just such bullshit. Just such a, well, there's standing waves, and there's this kind of waves, and the waves, light plus light equals dark. I mean, if you think you're going anywhere with that kind of crap. Ooh, sorry, hit the microphone. All right, whatever, 60-second warning. Anybody has anything to say, anything to offer, anything constructive at all? Anything useful on the subject, something? Let's see how many people are here. It's funny that the middle of the day doesn't really help much usually. Maybe it would. Yeah, 9. It's just as bad at 2 in the morning. I can get 9 viewers at 2 in the morning. So anyway, 2 in the afternoon. It's no different. Which seems a little strange. But I guess it's the nature of my audience. Oh, I need more of an audience. Surprised at the $3,000 contest thing, nobody's suggesting it to their friends or anything. I mean, eventually somebody might talk about it, but it's just kind of funny that you offer $3,000 for doing almost nothing. And, you got 8 takers. They will be rewarded. There will be at least a 1.5 advantage to getting in early. All right, so I guess we'll call it a video. Very good video, I think, mostly. Anyway, till the next time and such.